Do Forsaken deserve some love in Tides of Torment? It's time to discuss Forsaken from top to bottom. They may not be rising in the favorite charts, but they can put some pain into the enemy, and that's what you're here for. Undivided Forsaken are our baseline. Recruited for 750 gold and 188 upkeep, or equivalent thereof, this unit is 80 entities with 8,000 health for 100 hit points per. They're for 20 and 2,000 less respectively than Chaos Warriors. That's something we need to keep in mind. Entities arrive with armor 85 and no shields whatsoever. This combination is extremely important to understanding what the unit can survive and what it can't. Leadership 70 is actually much better than a lot of normal infantry. Speed 46 and charge speed 50 are the sorts of things you'd expect from the Beastman infantry, and not Chaos. Melee attack begins at 32, or the Empire Swordsman standard. Attack interval 4.3 is over the median of 4, but it fits with those swordsmen just fine. There is no splash damage whatsoever. Melee defense begins at the atrocious level of 20. This is equivalent to Marauder great weapons, albeit here we have armor 85 and they have armor 15. Weapon strength here comes at 58, split base 44, and armor piercing 14. This is a huge amount of damage, the problem being that it's base tilted heavy, which means this is very much the tier 2 unit it claims to be. It's not going to be effective in dishing damage out against top tier enemy forces without substantial help. On the other hand, the total damage is definitely fierce, as if you crossed Chaos Spawn with Chaos Warriors, a comparison I'm making now so that it doesn't come as a surprise later. Charge bonus is 36, which is very high for infantry. Norscan Berserkers get 42 stock. Mass is 250 per entity. This is very high for so-called small infantry. The unit can hide in forest, it has full-time immunity to psychology, so cannot be terror routed, barring some recent exceptions that can remove this trait. Nakai and Dekala come to mind. Moreover, on that note, the unit has Frenzy. For melee attack plus 10, weapon strength and charge bonus plus 10% above baseline, until morale is wrecked by damage. Frenzy grants immunity to psychology, but removing Frenzy doesn't remove ITP. That takes the aforementioned very rare effects. That concludes our baseline, but looking back, melee attack 42 plus 40 on the first hit of a charge, weapon strength 64 plus 40 from that charge. This is a lot of offense. The bad parts are low defense and low entity count, and no shields. What about Forsaken of Khorne? I'm starting here because we already know the unit gets Frenzy, so it can't get Frenzy twice. It's the obvious question to continue with. Recruited for 800 gold equivalent and 200 upkeep, armor of 100 is 15 better. I mean, that's normal Chaos Warrior level. And the way the math works, that is a significant safety margin against incoming base damage, making the blocked damage more consistent. Spell resistance 35% is to be expected. New to the unit is that we have flaming attacks from Forsaken. Also new is melee defense tumbles to a horrifying 15. And actually that's it. There are no other changes. The 800 recruit is cheap relative to some other things, and the combination makes it one of the more efficient Dryad mulchers around, but any perceived advantage is mainly from the better armor and the flaming attacks. But you still get the frenzy and the general offensive heft, along with the low melee defense. It's even more of a blunt instrument than before. Forsaken of Nurgle actually cost 850 gold and 213 upkeep. Health of 8,720 is part of the package, the higher priced package. Melee attack begins at only 27, but we have poison with every blow. Melee defense of 25 is better than usual, of course. This version of Forsaken also causes fear, interestingly enough. Now, the fact we have Frenzy to offset the minor loss of melee attack, and the poison provides a lot of damage muffling against immediate opponents, tends to make this a strong overall choice. We mourn the loss of attack nonetheless. Forsaken of Slaanesh were what inspired me to write this script. Priced at 800 gold and 200 upkeep equivalent, we get physical resistance 5% or token levels, but speed 51 and charge speed 55 actually significantly help it to move around, like rushing victory locations in a city. Immunity to Psychology isn't new, but Strider is, and that helps mostly in shallow water, but also avoids fatigue penalties when going up hills. And Devastating Flanker. That's a perk your baseline Marauder infantry don't get. And with Frenzy raising charge bonus to 40 on a baseline unit, charge bonus 80 when flanking makes this a shockingly strong unit in the open field. Now, Daemonettes also have it, so it's a choice of what you prefer in a given situation, losing a lot of armor for gaining a lot of armor piercing, but these Forsaken are hardly weak. For Tzeentch, their Forsaken come at 825 gold and 206 upkeep. The unit gets 800 barrier hit points by default, and that helps a lot with the initial rush and melee blows. As expected, all blows are magical attack. This variant is interesting mainly because of the mismatch potential. Daemonettes are probably its worst horizontal opponent, but if they attack something with high physical resistance, low armor, and that does mostly base damage, Norsca might qualify, Skaven have some units like that, it's going to be a one-sided bloodbath, because low melee defense won't matter long enough given the high armor. Also, despite the lack of shields, the speed and base damage made this one of my favorite early game anti-High Elves units back in the day when I was playing Kairos against Teclis. The more orthodox the enemy army, the more they outbrawl spearmen, and gods forbid they make it to the archers. For redline boosts, these will be faction specific to a point that can't be covered by a single video, but let's look at these standard Chaos Lord boosts because every monogod faction gets them now. Chaos Vanguard at 3 pips gives them armor plus 12 and melee attack plus 8. The armor won't help in every situation, but when it does, this is amazing, and melee attack plus 8 speaks for itself. That means melee attack effectively 50 for a rank 0 unit at the start of a battle. Legion of Doom gives rank 7 Forsaken some extra TLC for armor plus 10, melee defense plus 5, and spell resistance plus 20%. That's good for everyone, but the Khorne variant has to be loving this a lot. The tech tree doesn't offer Undivided any particular love because you're expected to view the monogod flavors as the real upgrades. So how do we use the Forsaken? I've alluded to it, but let's get a little grainy. Since they lack shields, Forsaken are murdered by gunlines. Since they lack melee defense, they are chewed up by numerous characters and elite infantry. Because they lack charge defense, despite the high mass, they can get rolled over by chariots, and armor-piercing chariots will feast on them. Because they lack shields, all archers can extract an HP toll even if they are not armor-piercing tilted, and middle options like crossbowmen similarly do very well against them. And since they are not anti-large or heavily anti-armor, their value against your Reiksguard or regional equivalent is limited. Against everything else, Forsaken generally don't simply trade. They outright dominate. Any kind of low-tier sword or spear unit will be ripped apart and demolished without delivering effective damage in turn. Low armor, armor-piercing anti-large units, like Empire Halberdiers, will similarly die horrifically despite the damage they are inflicting penetrating Forsaken armor consistently. Braced units without expert charge defense won't get any help from bracing. As mentioned earlier, virtually any missile infantry unit is going to have a very bad day, with even the armored ones, like Dwarf Quarrelers, just not being good enough in melee combat to withstand the assault, much like I mentioned in my Skin Wolves video. Just this is an AT entity at full health unit. Since missile infantry tend toward lower entity counts themselves, Forsaken simply brutalize them. Since Forsaken are fast and are armored, things like standard mortar artillery and arrow fire diminish them but almost never break them before they get to an infantry line, even though they follow the Gore Horde rules. Get the package to the enemy line, and then they're tons safer. They have armor Gore Horde can only fantasize about. Well, they're also extra balance of power you won't enjoy losing. And, though this is true generally regardless, any soft target like Order-Tide artillery swarmed by Forsaken are, Forsaken themselves. It's game over when that happens. Since the tech trees aren't necessarily going to help much, if you want to take them seriously, you probably want a Mortal Lord with Chaos Vanguard redline pips. Plus 8 melee attack is stupidly good when the damage output is already this healthy, and it's a relatively tiny investment. you will find yourself creaking under the limitations when you are dealing with things designed to exploit their weaknesses. But even so, everything I just said applies to all Forsaken, base unit included. I included asides during the earlier part, but to expand on that slightly. The Slaanesh ones are hidden gems. Anything that boosts mortal units generally, like the Kala's faction leader bonus, does help them too. The other varieties have different takes, mostly on increasing their survivability. Even the Khorne one will, if it is aimed at the right targets. Tzeentch's barrier hit points really help survive fire while getting to the front line in order to do gore horde things. Frenzied combat, that is. Speaking of Tzeentch, Spawn of Tzeentch with full-time armor sundering in melee is a huge boon to Forsaken of any kind. Similar boosts, like Lore of Metal generally, including the juicy passive, help them out further. Soul Blight is an easy way to make them hit even harder, and is an area effect spell. You might find it heresy to play to the strength of such a low-tier unit in the grand scheme of things, but more damage makes angels cry, and you're here to be evil. Once you're fighting a Primeval Glory army of hardened dinosaurs, their disadvantages come under bright, harsh lights, but the amount of crazy shoestring fighting you can do with them, short of that point, is actually pretty impressive. Pretty good for units not in favor with the powers that be. Take care, and have fun zealously and jealously slashing the good races out of pure spite.